Social distancing at the chamber, a Monday night edition, also known as Happy Hour with Hammer. As always, we're joined by the CEO of the Arizona Chamber, Glenn Hammer. My name is Garrick Taylor, and our frequent guest on the show, Courtney Coolidge. Hi, Courtney.
Hi.
Glenn, it's always great to class up the joint, huh?
I agree.
You guys are very casual for a Monday today.
I wear this shirt a lot. I wear semi-work clothes during the day, but this time I'm about an hour from pool time.
That's right. Right. All right, let's do a quick look back at the end of last week. A panel called the Legislative Council got together to consider summaries that will be included in this fall's publicity pamphlet that the Secretary of State's office puts out. These are little snapshots of what each proposed ballot initiative will do. Now, Courtney, when we think about Legislative Council, we are usually thinking of staff, the attorneys who help draft legislative language and keep lawmakers on the straight and narrow. But it's actually a bipartisan group of senators and representatives that make up the actual Legislative Council.
Yeah, correct, Garrick. So Legislative Council actually does the initial draft of these ballot analysis. So for this year, there's 4 potential items that are going to be on the ballot. And Leg Council's charge by statute is to come up with a description of the measure that's clear and concise for voters, that's not technical. So they do that and they present it to this body, which you referenced, which is the bipartisan group. And they explain what the measure does, and the group, the Legislative Council Committee, has the opportunity to amend that draft. Ultimately, that draft is what appears in the ballot pamphlet for voters to review when they're trying to figure out what these initiatives do. So it's an important process.
So we at the Chamber, we've got established positions on 3 of the 4 proposed initiatives. We might take a position on the 4th. I should also note that whether all 4 make the ballot, that's on a separate track. We still don't know that yet. That's being hashed out in the courtroom. But on the summaries, Legislative Council presented to this bipartisan panel a description of the tax initiative. It seeks to raise taxes. And in the draft that was adopted, it says that there's now going to be an 8% income tax rate on individual income over $250,000 or household income over $500,000. That's a big jump from the current tax rate of 4.5%. And Courtney, when you go from 4.5% to 8%, how big of a jump is that?
That's almost a 78% increase, 77.7, which Legislative Council noted in their initial draft as introduced. A couple important things in their initial draft that aren't clear to voters. This will impact small businesses, and it is a 77.7% tax increase. And so Leg Council had those on their initial draft, and they ultimately stayed in there throughout the hearing. So it was adopted. I think Leg Council did, let me just say hats off to Leg Council. This hearing was 7 hours via a Zoom hearing to adopt all 4 of these analysis. So to the members on the panel, the Leg Council, they did a great job. But one of the things that Leg Council brought up during, staff Leg Council brought up during the hearing is that these same provisions were litigated in 2018 and were upheld. So there was some talk about removing these, but Leg Council believed these were accurate, and not only were these accurate, they were already litigated in 2018, and the judge agreed.
Glenn, what sparked the Chamber's interest in this particular measure is, sure, an income tax is, especially of this magnitude, it's a tax on productivity. It suppresses economic activity, makes our recovery that much more difficult. But let's go over a point that Courtney just brought up. This taxes small businesses because pass-through entities, they don't pay their taxes on the corporate code. They pay it on the personal income tax code. They're about to get hit with a big, I guess as the president would say, bigly tax increase.
It would end Arizona's competitiveness as we know it, Garrick. It's really that serious. It's a direct hit on small business. It's misleading. It's a 77.7% tax increase on that income. that so many small businesses rely on to hire and keep workers employed. And here we are in a pandemic where our small businesses have been dropping like flies. Why in the world we would want to do anything to weaken their ability to stay in business, to keep workers employed, and hopefully at some point to bring back workers is beyond me. And this is there's constantly this game to be misleading. They use terms like surcharge. I'd argue that's intentionally misleading. They try to play the game. This is only 3.5% increase when it's 77.7%, which is almost 20 times the amount that they're selling. And again, we're in a pandemic. I mean, we spend so much of our time trying to help Arizona small businesses stay afloat. We've, I think, done a reasonably good job of promoting the federal Paycheck Protection Program, which has probably saved 1 million or so Arizona small business jobs. It's very regrettable that this is back up. It's terribly damaging, terribly distracting. And my final point here is that Arizona has done more than any other state in the country to put resources and to reform its K-12 system. This is the third year of the governor's 20% by 2020 plan to increase teacher salaries by 20%. We strongly supported that and support that effort. There will continue to be cost of living increases. But guess what? If this thing has the effect on the economy that we think, we can't just print money in the state of Arizona. This will ultimately harm education funding if it passes, as well as funding for other necessary programs like healthcare.
Glenn, to your point, Jaime Molera, who's chairing the opposition committee against this measure, pointed out that it was a healthy economy that allowed lawmakers to make the major investments that they have in the K-12 system. And the average 20% statewide pay raise that kicks in this year, that was only made possible because lawmakers had the resources to draw upon.
Yeah, and even this year's quote unquote skinny budget continued to put extra dollars, not just the 20 by 2020, but additional resources for additional assistance. So, and again, another big defect in this policy is zero funding, zero additional real funding. There's a couple of gimmicks in this thing, but really zero additional funding for our outstanding community college system. And think about how important that is, as so many workers have been displaced, and zero real additional dollars for our world-class universities. So it's a bad proposal on the merits of it in terms of what it does to education, and it's terrible when it comes to the damage it would do to Arizona's competitiveness.
Courtney, if you have an 8% income tax rate, Arizona then crawls into the top 10 highest tax rates in the country. It's not a top 10 list you want to be a part of. It also erodes all the simplification that the legislature has done the last couple of sessions. It creates this 8% tax bracket, and it wipes out the simplification that Arizona passed to align its our tax code more closely with the feds in light of the federal tax reform.
Yeah, it's not good when we're being compared to mine and Glenn's home states, California and New York, and that's where we'll be if this tax increase takes effect. Yeah. It also has no guarantees on accountability of funding and no guarantees what amounts are going to go to teacher salary. So Ledge Council in their analysis did a good job of highlighting the expansive definitions of teachers and personnel, not traditionally what a voter would think of, who might get some funding, but because this is such a volatile funding source, there's really no guarantees from year to year what money will be available. So
yeah, that's a good point. All right, well, we will continue to watch this. These summaries from time to time have been litigated, so we will stay tuned to see which summary ultimately ends up in the pamphlet. Courtney, before we move to the next topic, The language got a little spicy on some open mics during the hearing, huh?
I mean, the problems with Zoom, you're still figuring out the mute button. It happens to everyone.
Yeah. Glenn, we're really looking forward to seeing the video once it's posted. I'm looking forward to seeing how they're going to bleep some of that stuff out on open mics.
I hope there's an unedited version of it.
All right. Well, we will stay tuned for that. Keep an eye on it. All right. Next topic. We were all on a call with the U.S. Chamber late this afternoon. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell rolled out the framework of the next relief package. A lot of negotiations still to go, not only within the Senate, but also between the Senate and the House. Glenn, on a call today with the U.S. Chamber, we talked about 5 big issues: liability, unemployment supports, state and local aid, the PPP program, and supports for state-level unemployment trust funds to keep them harmless. All right, what jumped out at you from today's call, and what are you looking forward to over the next week as Congress debates this?
The liability reform provision seems to be very strong, and for the business community, that's essential. We certainly don't want to protect willful misconduct, but for those companies, the vast majority that are playing by the rules and doing their best to accommodate the new standards, the CDC and the local healthcare standards, they shouldn't be sued out of existence. What also stood out is KTAR broke a great story in the morning, is that many of our K through 12 schools aren't going to have coverage for COVID-19 liability claims. So this isn't just important for the business community. This is critical for our K through 12 community, our universities, our nonprofits, our cities and towns. So, Senator McConnell, the majority leader of the United States Senate, making this a red line issue is very, very important. Because think about some of those other issues, Garrick. Talk about putting extra dollars into our K through 12 and university systems. The Senate bill puts in over $100 billion into both areas. Wouldn't there be something wrong that if those dollars were put in, but they're all coming out sort of the other side, so to speak, to deal with frivolous or opportunistic lawsuits? I mean, that wouldn't really accomplish those goals. So that stood out. What also stood out, Garrick, is the recognition that we're going to need to continue to have more resources go in terms of federal resources into our unemployment insurance system. We need to make sure that the PPP continues in some form. There'll probably be some sort of loan forgiveness for the loans $150,000 or less. So it seems that the elements are there, and we know that there will be, in the final negotiations, additional aid for states and localities. It's a question of how it's done. Final point is that I do think the Senate package in the $1 trillion range seems to be more in touch with where we are today. There's also some additional money for testing and things like that than the $3.5 trillion House package. U.S. debt is hurling towards 30 trillion. We are at deficit levels that we haven't seen since World War II. So we do need to be mindful of the federal deficit and debt as well.
Yeah. Courtney, you've been working on this liability stuff for the last several months. And while there might be a state level package sometime at a point TBD, a lot of our members have said some federal guidance in this area would be especially helpful, and looks like we're close to getting something.
Yeah, we hope so. I think some federal guidance would be great. And like Glenn talked about, this is a red line issue for McConnell. So we hope to see it in the final package. And ultimately, it's a floor. So it doesn't prohibit the states from doing more. But I think it's really important when we want to start our economic recovery. We've been hearing this is a barrier for businesses for months now. And so it's really important we get something done.
Yeah. State chambers around the country have probably heard from members that, well, why not copy the same model as this state or that state? Courtney, as you know, each state has its own constraints around its ability to craft liability reform. So for the feds to do something, that would be really helpful in this space.
Agreed.
All right. Glenn, you heard also on today's call, before we move on to the next topic, we thought Mnuchin early said that a bill gets done this week. McConnell said ain't going to happen. Then we were looking at next week. It could be the week after. You've pointed out, though, urgency is helpful here if these guys want to go on their usual August recess.
Yes, I was working for Senator Kyle. I believe the last time Senate recess was delayed, and that was in the year 1995. Now, the difference between 1995 and 2020 is that there's actually, back then, there were places you could go outside of your home state. So I'm not sure if that normal deadline is still has that same sort of urgency for senators, but I would expect either next week or the week after. I think by mid-August, the U.S. Congress will have passed its fifth and final, before the election, major COVID-19 bill.
All right, topic 3, play ball. The D-backs drop another one to the Padres today on the road. Glenn, was that the D-backs' last game of the year? We learned that there's been a COVID outbreak on the Marlins roster. Where do you think this is headed?
I certainly hope not, Garrick. And I'm excited about the D-backs club. I've been predicting a repeat of the 2001 World Series between my birth town, Bronx Bombers, and the Arizona Diamondbacks, and we know how that one ended. My hope is that baseball and other sports leagues can adjust quickly to learn the lessons of the Marlins breakout. I don't know what those were, but certainly some of the protocols need to be tightened up. I believe it would be a big psychic blow to the country if baseball were canceled. I will admit I am a baseball fan. I probably care more about baseball than anything else outside of my family. I'll admit that as a chamber guy. So I'm biased. I want the players to be safe. I want all the people involved in the game to be safe. But there's a lot of Americans who go to work each and every day. And here we are, we're also having a debate about sending in Arizona 1 million kids back to school at some point, and 50,000 teachers and a lot of support personnel. So, as we're trying to get back to work, we need, in my opinion, we need to learn how to live with this virus. So I hope that the protocols can be tightened up, and we'll continue to hear the beautiful words, play ball.
Courtney, there was a story in A1 of the Republic over the weekend. D-backs beat writer Nick Pecora wrote a story about downtown San Diego is just weird right now. Usually on game days, it's packed with people, and he says it's basically empty. The Forrester household are season ticket holders. I assume those tickets are just sitting on a shelf somewhere, not getting used.
You're exactly right. I think they're in my room right now, but I agree with Glenn. It's been a nice checkout to watch baseball, so I really hope they can figure out how to move the season forward. So.
Yep. First Suns game is on Friday. NBA doing a different model, which is the bubble model, where they put everybody under one roof and basically do a massive quarantine. We thought that baseball early on was going to do a bubble model because you could do it in Arizona and Florida with all the facilities, but it became obvious that playing outdoor games would be unpleasant. Glenn, they're going to have to figure this out because it's hard to do the bubble model in baseball, unlike hockey or basketball.
I certainly hope that they can. And again, understand we want everyone to be safe, and this is a very serious disease. But I do think that we are all going to need to figure out how best to live with this disease. And baseball and all the sports leagues in the United States and even many of them internationally have been working towards figuring this out. And some have had more success than others. And Garrick, I think this is a type of situation that, just like we've all learned from different states in terms of what this state has done right or this state has done wrong, we continue to improve. And I would hope that that would be the case with Major League Sports. And again, I will admit that I'm biased as a former Cornell Daily Sun sports writer. I love this stuff. So there is definitely an element of emotion here. Ultimately, we'll respect what the sports leagues do. They're going to do what's best for their teams. But I'm still optimistic we can keep the season going. It just may be bumpy, and there may, instead of rain outs, there may be COVID-19 outs from time to time, unfortunately.
All right. That's a Monday night edition in the books. Thanks, Courtney. Thanks, Glenn.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you in the next one.